Batman Begins is 20 years old now, and rather than having an existential meltdown about this fact, I decided to make a video instead. So here we go. This film centers around the idea of fear, and this is very clear to anyone who's seen it. It revisits this theme again and again and covers it from so many different angles. When I first saw this 14 years ago, even as a young college student, I was impressed by how well it stuck to a central psychological theme in a way that most other superhero movies just didn't do at the time. The heavy usage of fear in Batman's origin story was a really good choice. There are a number of different emotional threads that it could have pulled at, but choosing this one just made sense with both his backstory and his current persona. I've watched almost every Batman movie, and this angle continues to feel pretty unique to me. And then there's the secondary theme. It's how he becomes the symbol for Gotham, a legend larger than just a single person. He learns this from Ra's al Ghul and later echoes the sentiment himself. He says, "As a man, I can be ignored or destroyed, but as a symbol, I can become incorruptible, everlasting." And this idea of the symbol ties back into the theme of fear because it's ultimately this menacing, imposing symbol that strikes dread into Gotham's enemies. And these two ideas, fear and becoming a symbol, these are what the whole movie revolves around. This feels like such a brilliantly simple way to approach the character of Batman. These two ideas capture the essence of the character while also simply creating a compelling story. Like, it's just an interesting movie overall. And I think that ties into maybe the strongest aspect of the film and the trilogy as a whole. They're great movies if you like Batman and superheroes, but they're also great even if you're hardly familiar with him. Now there's the line that I think summarizes the film perfectly. Bruce Wayne is asked what he seeks when he first meets with the League of Shadows, and he says, "I seek the means to fight injustice, to turn fear against those who prey on the fearful." And this idea of turning fear against Gotham's enemies is seen in every aspect of the character of Batman, such as his use of deception and darkness to his advantage, or his overall pitch-black aesthetic, or even his somewhat brooding personality. And not only does Batman evoke fear, but the villains and criminals of Gotham also thrive on it, either through the twisted theatricality of villains like the Joker or Riddler, or through more traditional means of organized crime like with Carmine Falcone's gang. And this sheds some light on the line that I mentioned earlier when Bruce Wayne says he seeks to turn fear against those who prey on the fearful. Gotham is crawling with villains who use fear for their own nefarious or psychotic purposes, and the character of Batman reverses this fear onto them. Specifically, in this film, Bruce Wayne turns his own fears against his adversaries. I think that's a huge key to the movie, so I'll repeat it. Bruce Wayne turns his own fears against his adversaries. The first way he does this is pretty obvious. It's through this physical symbol of the bat. He explicitly says that he's terrified of bats and he wants his enemies to share his dread. The swarm of bats is visually correlated with fear throughout the movie, appearing in nightmares, flashbacks, or in this scene when he first inhales the fear toxin. But as he becomes the Dark Knight, we see him gaining control over the swarm, even using and directing them. And there's perhaps also a second, more complex way that he turns his own fears on Gotham's enemies. Bruce Wayne's teacher, Ra's al Ghul, says that Wayne's deepest fear is something inside himself. He's afraid of his own power, his own anger, his own drive to do great or terrible things. And the physical symbol of the bat can be viewed as a metaphor for this, and the film can be viewed as a story about how Bruce Wayne harnesses this unruly drive, this angry swarm within, and the same dread that was once inflicted upon himself by himself is then turned upon Gotham's enemies. There is a certain energy around Batman that is absent in most other superheroes. He feels menacing and imposing, and just as he's physically very human, possessing no superhuman abilities, his underlying psyche also feels quite fallible and dark and nebulous at times. But that's part of his character, and that's part of the reason why so many people love the character of Batman well into adulthood. He feels more raw or authentic than a lot of other superheroes do. And there's also another pretty interesting storyline that tackles fear. It's where Falcone tells Bruce Wayne that he'll always fear the criminal underworld because he'll never understand it. So Bruce goes on this global journey to understand the criminal mind, only to realize that they're quite simple. Or at least this is what Ra's al Ghul concludes. The criminal mind is not difficult to understand, but what Bruce feared the whole time was, again, something inside of him. This is reinforced later in the film. Falcone and his simple gang of thugs are easily subdued, while Scarecrow and the toxin that brings out Bruce's deepest fears prove to be a much more formidable test. So Christopher Nolan is like taking this point about fear and driving it home with a sledgehammer throughout the movie. And while he does lay it on thick sometimes, I love how persistent this theme is and how he attacks it from so many angles. Now, one thing I will say is that we as a culture sometimes emulate the worst possible fictional characters. And look, I don't think any of us are ever qualified to use fear in the way that Bruce Wayne does, but in the sense of pure fiction and fantasy, it is compelling. And even though I don't think that these darker, more complicated characters should be emulated, they're often much more intriguing in a fictional context than your stereotypical, like, good guy characters. And another thing about the movie that I like that feels pretty relevant right now is how it tries to draw this distinction between justice and mere vengeance, even though they can seem similar at times, especially in the midst of desperation. And a crucial element of Bruce Wayne becoming the Dark Knight is that he learns the difference between the two. Like the people of Gotham, many of us are angry and dissatisfied with the status quo, and rightfully so. But that can sort of manifest itself in ways that are not productive or helpful, that are merely angry and vengeful. Perhaps in ways that want to harm those who do not agree with us, that seeks to externalize our anger and pain. So I think this aspect of the movie acts as a counterbalance to the theme of fear. Like the theme of understanding what justice is at a deeper level, that's as important as seeking to fight injustice in the first place. Overall, I love this film and it aged so well for being made in 2005. Like, for perspective, this came out a year before Tokyo Drift, and Tokyo Drift is a fun movie, but a lot of it just feels so 2000s. I mean, a lot of early 2000s action movies just have that 2000s feeling and gloss all over it. Like, if you know, you know, I guess. But Batman Begins doesn't feel like an early 2000s movie at all, partly because of the overall stylization, and especially because they didn't use a lot of CGI and relied pretty heavily on practical effects. It's also worth noting that Nolan started working on this movie just a year and a half after 9/11. So the idea of fear, and specifically weaponized fear, were on the forefront of everyone's mind at the time, and that almost certainly influenced the movie. I know this film is often viewed as just the precursor to The Dark Knight, but I'd argue that aside from Heath Ledger's legendary performance, Batman Begins is the superior movie in most other ways. I prefer the plot and the themes of Batman Begins and how the character of Batman himself is portrayed and unpacked as opposed to The Dark Knight. The ending of Batman Begins also felt more satisfying to me. Of course, Ledger's performance cements The Dark Knight as the consensus favorite of the trilogy, and you know, rightfully so, but I really love Batman Begins. Anyway, on that perhaps controversial note, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.